The morning my brother announced he was moving his girlfriend into my apartment, the apartment I'd been paying for alone for 3 years, he said it like he was doing me a favor. "You'll have company," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "It'll be good for you." I remember standing in the kitchen doorway holding a mug of coffee I'd just made and feeling something go very still inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Just this quiet, cold recognition that we had been living in two completely different versions of the same story for a very long time. My name is Jess. I'm 31 years old. I'm a registered nurse, and for 6 years, 6 actual years of my adult life, I paid for things I never agreed to pay for, never asked to be responsible for, and never once got a thank you for. Not once. Not a single time. I want to tell you how that ended. But to do that, I have to go back to the beginning. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, the middle kid in a family of 3. My older brother, who I'll call my brother, is 4 years older than me. My younger sister is 5 years younger. My parents owned a small house in a quiet neighborhood on the east side. Nothing fancy, just a regular house on a regular street. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. Money was always something that caused tension, something that got whispered about behind closed doors or exploded into arguments at the dinner table. My mom stopped working when my sister was born. My dad had a job in logistics that paid okay but not great. By the time I was in high school, I had figured out something that I don't think anyone ever said out loud. In this family, the person who earns is the person who gets used. I watched it happen to my dad for years. Every bonus, every overtime check, every tax refund. It disappeared into something the family needed. A car repair. A school trip. A bill that had gotten away from them. My dad never complained, he just handed it over and went back to work. And I told myself I would never be that person. I was wrong. I became exactly that person. I just took longer to see it. I graduated from nursing school when I was 23. I was the first person in my immediate family to finish a 4-year degree. My parents came to the graduation. My mom cried. My brother showed up late and spent most of the reception on his phone. My sister was 16 and bored. I got my first job at a hospital in Columbus and started making real money, not rich person money, but stable, consistent, grown adult money. Benefits. A retirement account. My own health insurance for the first time in my life. For about 4 months, it felt like freedom. Then my mom called. It started small, the way it always does with these things. She mentioned, very casually, that they were behind on the electric bill. "Just a one-time thing," she said. "Could I help out? Just this once?" I sent $300. The next month, it was the water bill. Then it was a car payment my dad had missed. Then it was groceries because things had gotten tight. Each time, it was just this once. Each time, I said yes. By the time I was 25, I was sending money home almost every month. Not a fixed amount that would have felt like an agreement, something with a shape I could see and plan around. Instead, it was always reactive, always urgent, always framed as a crisis that I, specifically, had the power to fix. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself they were my family. I told myself that this was what you do. The apartment situation started when I was 27. My parents had been renting for a couple of years by then. They'd sold the house and weren't in a position to buy again. They found a place in a suburb just outside Columbus, but the rent was more than they could comfortably cover on my dad's salary alone. My mom asked if I could help with the portion. "Just a few hundred a month," she said. "Until things stabilize." I said yes. I always said yes, but then my brother lost his job. And instead of moving out and finding something cheaper, he moved into my parents' rental. And suddenly, the few hundred a month I was contributing didn't feel like helping my parents anymore. It felt like subsidizing my brother's decision to stop trying. My brother's, I say this with as much fairness as I can manage, someone who has always found a way to let other people carry the weight. He's charming, he's funny, he can talk himself in and out of almost anything. But he's never held a job for more than 2 years, never paid rent on time without being reminded, never once initiated a plan for his own life. He just sort of arrived in situations and waited for them to resolve themselves. Usually, someone else resolved them. Usually, that someone was me. By the time I was 28, I had moved to Charlotte, North Carolina for a better position at a hospital there. I told my family I was going. I hadn't asked for permission. I found a good apartment. 1 bedroom, a 10-minute drive from work, the first place I'd ever lived completely alone. I furnished it myself. I set up my own internet, my own utilities, my own everything. And then I made the mistake of not drawing a clear enough line. I kept sending money, not as much as before. Charlotte was more expensive than Columbus, but I kept sending it. And my family kept calling, and the calls kept being about money. The thing about being far away from a family like mine is that the distance doesn't actually create separation. It just changes the medium. The need follows you. It finds your new phone number. It knows your work schedule. It calls on Sunday nights when you're tired and already feeling a little guilty about being happy somewhere they aren't. My brother was the worst of it. He'd call me directly now, bypassing our parents, which, in retrospect, I should have recognized as a strategy. He needed money for a security deposit on an apartment. He needed money for a car repair so he could get to job interviews. He needed a loan, always with vague promises to pay it back, for something that always sounded almost reasonable. I loaned him money 6 times in 2 years. He paid back exactly none of it. The girlfriend situation happened about a year after I moved to Charlotte. I want to be precise about how it unfolded, because I think the details matter. I did not have a spare room. I had a 1-bedroom apartment. My brother called me one Sunday and said, very casually, that he and his girlfriend were looking for options and that Charlotte seemed like a good place to get a fresh start. He asked if they could stay with me for just a few weeks while they found a place. I said no. It was the first time in my adult life I had said no to a direct request from my brother. It felt physical, like something that had been stuck suddenly moved. And for about a week after that call, I felt lighter than I had in years. Then my mother called. She didn't yell. She never yelled. She had this particular tone she used instead. Quiet, heavy with disappointment, like she was carrying something very sad that you had made her carry. She said she didn't understand why I was being so unwilling to help my own brother. She said family took care of family. She said I had more than enough. You make good money, she said. It's not like it would hurt you. She wasn't wrong that I made decent money, but she had a very specific definition of more than enough that seemed to always mean more than enough to give to us. I held the line. I said no again. My brother didn't come to Charlotte, but something shifted in how my family talked to me after that. There was a new edge in the conversations, a new accounting. Like they were keeping a list of things I had refused to do, and the list was growing, and eventually, they were going to present it to me. I found out about the list on a Thursday evening in February. I had driven back to Columbus for my dad's birthday, a 4-hour drive each way, which I did because I loved my dad and wanted to see him. He's a quiet man, my dad. He doesn't ask for much. He's one of the people in that family I feel least complicated about. My mom made dinner. My sister was there. My brother was there with his girlfriend, who I was meeting for the first time. She was fine. Perfectly nice. Not the problem. The problem came after dinner, when the dishes were cleared and my dad had gone to the living room to watch television, and my brother leaned back in his chair and said, very casually, "We've been talking about a few things." We meant him and my mother. I understood that immediately. What followed was about 45 minutes of the most organized financial intervention I have ever experienced. They had numbers. They had a list of things I'd refused to help with over the past 2 years. They had a counter-proposal. If I moved back to Columbus, I could pay a reduced amount to cover a portion of the family's expenses while my brother and his girlfriend got on their feet. My brother actually used the phrase, get on their feet. I asked how long that would take. He said, a year, maybe 2. I looked at my mother. She was looking at her hands. And if I don't move back, I asked. There was a pause. My brother looked at my mom. She looked at me. And she said in that quiet, heavy voice, "Then I think we need to rethink what kind of family we're going to be." I didn't say anything. I went to the living room and sat next to my dad and watched the rest of the basketball game with him. He put his hand on my shoulder at some point, which was not something he did often. I think he knew. I think he'd known for a long time. I drove back to Charlotte the next morning before anyone else was awake. I called my best friend from the car. She's known me since college, and she is one of the people who has watched this whole thing unfold in real time over a lot of years and a lot of late-night phone calls. She listened to the whole thing. When I finished, she said, "Jess, you know what you have to do." I did know. I think I had known for longer than I wanted to admit. When I got back to Charlotte, I sat down with my bank statements from the past 3 years. I had never actually added it up. I think on some level I had been afraid to. The total was just over $31,000. Not counting the loans to my brother, which I had mentally moved into the gone category a long time ago. $31,000 over 3 years. Sent home to a family that was now sitting around a dinner table presenting me with an invoice for more. I made a decision that night. Not an angry decision. Or not only angry. It was more like something finally becoming clear after years of trying to see it through fog. I was done. I didn't announce it. I didn't send a long email or make a dramatic phone call. I just stopped. The first month, I didn't send in anything. My mom texted asking if everything was okay. I said yes, I was just tight on money this month. Which was a lie, but I wasn't ready for the conversation yet. The second month, I didn't send anything again. My brother called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was friendly on the surface but had that particular texture underneath, the one that meant something was being asked. The third month, my mom called and I answered. She asked directly about the money. I told her, calmly and without a lot of emotion, that I had been thinking about my finances and I had decided I couldn't continue sending money home. I said I was happy to talk once a month and I wanted to stay in her life, but I was not in a position to be a financial resource for the family anymore. She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Your brother needs you." "I know," I said, "but I need me too." She hung up. My brother texted me 17 times in the next 2 days. I responded to exactly none of them. For about 6 weeks there was silence. Not peaceful silence, the kind of silence that has weight to it, that you know is being actively maintained on the other end. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know what shape it would take. It took the shape of a Sunday afternoon knock on my apartment door. My mother and my brother were standing in my doorway in Charlotte. They had driven 4 hours without telling me they were coming. My mother was holding a casserole dish, which I found almost unbearably surreal. My brother was holding a folder. A folder. I stood in the doorway and I thought, this is what it looks like. This is the thing I've been trying not to see for 6 years. This is what this family does with need. I let them in because I didn't know what else to do in that moment and also because my neighbor was in the hallway and I didn't want to have a scene. My brother put the folder on my kitchen table. Inside was a document, handwritten, not typed, that laid out what they were calling family expenses, that he felt I had a responsibility to contribute to. There was a total at the bottom, $28,500. I looked at that number for a while. Then I looked at my brother and I said, "You drove 4 hours to bring me a bill?" He said they weren't calling it a bill. They were calling it a conversation. My mom was quiet. She was sitting at my kitchen table, looking at the casserole dish she'd brought, and I had the sudden sense that she was not entirely sure this had been a good idea, but had come anyway because my brother had convinced her. I told them both, as clearly as I could, that I was not going to pay this. I told them I had already given this family more than $31,000 over 3 years, that none of the loans to my brother had ever been repaid, and that I had made a decision about my own financial future that I was not going to reverse because someone had driven down with a handwritten document. My brother said I was being selfish. I said, okay. He said I was abandoning my family. I said, okay. My mother said she hoped I understood what I was choosing. I said I did. I asked them to leave. They left. My mother tipped a casserole dish with her, which somehow made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. That was 14 months ago. In those 14 months, I have spoken to my mother 3 times. Each conversation has been brief and careful, like walking on ice you're not sure will hold. She doesn't bring up money anymore. Neither do I. I don't know if we'll find our way back to something warmer. Maybe. Maybe not. My dad called me about 2 months after the visit. He didn't mention any of it. Not the folder. Not the drive down. Not the money. He just asked how I was doing. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular. About the hospital where I work, about a documentary he'd been watching, about the weather. Before he hung up, he said, "I'm proud of you, you know." I said, "I know, Dad." He said, "I know, Dad." He said, "I mean for all of it. Not just the job." I didn't trust myself to say anything after that, so I just said I loved him and I'd talk to him soon. My brother has not contacted me since the day he drove down with the folder. I think about what that says. About the relationship, about what it was built on. And I try not to let the answer make me too sad. My sister is the one I least expected. She reached out to me about 4 months ago. She said she'd been watching everything from a distance for a long time, and she wanted me to know she didn't think I'd done anything wrong. She said she was working now, a real job, and she was trying to build something for herself. We've talked a few times. It's still careful, still new, but it's something real. Something that's actually mine. I don't live in Charlotte anymore. About 6 months after the doorstep visit, I got offered a position at a hospital in Nashville. Better pay, better unit, a department I actually wanted to be in. I took it. I found an apartment I love, second floor, natural light, a little balcony where I drink my coffee in the mornings. Nobody knows my address except my best friend and my sister. Not because I'm hiding exactly. More because I've learned that some people experience a home address as an invitation. I've been thinking a lot in the past year about the difference between loyalty and obligation. Loyalty, I think, is something you choose freely because you love someone and want to show up for them. Obligation is what happens when love gets leveraged. When people learn that your care for them can be used as a tool to get what they want. I loved my family. I still do. In the complicated way you love people who have shaped you even when the shaping wasn't always good. But I confused that love with a debt I didn't owe. I thought being the one who made more meant I had to give more. I thought keeping them comfortable was the same as being a good daughter and a good sister. It wasn't. It was just expensive. I am 31 years old. I have a retirement account that is actually growing. I have savings that didn't exist 2 years ago. I have a balcony and a cup of coffee and a morning that belongs entirely to me. For most of my adult life, I woke up with a low hum of anxiety in my chest. The constant background noise of, what does someone need today? What did I forget to send? Who is going to call? That hum is gone now. The mornings are just quiet. Just the sound of the city starting up outside and the coffee getting hot and whatever I feel like thinking about. It took me too long to get here. I know that. The comment I've heard most from people who've heard pieces of this story is some version of, "Why didn't you leave sooner?" And I think the honest answer is that I didn't know I was allowed to. I genuinely did not understand that I was a person with limits that were worth protecting. I understand it now. If you're somewhere in the middle of a story like this, if you're the one who always picks up the phone, always sends the money, always finds yourself holding the bill for choices you didn't make, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I wouldn't have listened to someone telling me either. But I will tell you that there is a version of your life where your income is yours, where your address is yours, where Sunday morning is quiet and the anxiety is gone, and the only person whose needs you're managing before 8 a.m. are your own. I didn't think I'd get there. I did. The coffee is better when you made it just for yourself. I've thought a lot about what made me stay so long in a dynamic that was clearly taking from me. And the honest answer isn't something flattering. It wasn't love, exactly. Or not only love. It was the fear of being seen as the person who didn't love enough. There's a particular kind of pressure that families can put on the one who made it, and it works precisely because it targets the part of you that genuinely cares. You give because you care. And then the giving becomes expected. And then the expectation becomes a demand. And somewhere in that progression, you stop being a daughter and a sister, and you become a resource I think about my brother showing up at my door with a folder, an actual handwritten folder, and I think about how, a few years earlier, that folder would have worked. I would have cried and felt guilty and probably written the check just to make the feeling stop. That's not a weakness I'm ashamed of anymore. It's just what I understood about myself then. I hadn't yet learned that guilt is not the same as responsibility, that someone leveraging your emotions doesn't mean they're right. What changed wasn't a single moment. It was the accumulation of moments, every unanswered thank you, every loan that quietly became a gift, every time someone called my financial stability a reason I should give more rather than something I had built deliberately with my own hands on my own schedule in my own life. At some point, the weight of all those moments became heavier than the fear of what saying no would cost me. And here is the thing about cause and effect that I kept missing for years. The more I gave without limit, the more limitless the asking became. I wasn't helping my brother build something. I was removing the pressure that would have forced him to build it himself. Every dollar I sent was, in some real way, a reason for him not to try. That's not a comfortable thing to sit with. But I think it's true. My dad understood something I didn't for a long time. He never asked me to stop. He never told me what to do. But he called me after everything fell apart and said he was proud of me, for all of it. And I knew what he meant. He meant the hard part. The part where you choose yourself not out of cruelty, but out of a clear-eyed understanding that you matter too, that your future matters too, that you are not a smaller version of a person because you have less money than you used to send away. I'm not who I was at 23. Fresh out of nursing school, handing over $300 because I didn't know yet that it would never stop there. I'm also not angry at that version of myself. She was doing the best she could with what she understood. What she didn't understand, what I had to learn the slow, expensive way, is that real love doesn't come with a running tab. Real family doesn't show up at your door with a folder. The Nashville mornings are quiet. I've started running again, something I gave up years ago when I was too tired and too financially stressed to think about anything beyond the next bill. I run in the early light before my shift starts, and I think about nothing in particular, and I feel the specific satisfaction of a life that is actually mine. That's what I want for anyone still in the middle of it. Not revenge, not a dramatic exit, just the quiet, ordinary freedom of a morning that belongs entirely to you.